Let's go see who's in the waiting room. All right. You and me. Okay, looks like we still got a few coming back, maybe. But we're gonna go ahead and get some our Kahoot screen. What? It's not our Kahoot screen. What am I doing? What the heck? All right, there we go. All right. That seems to work better. It says with up to 10 players, but we're gonna do more. All right, had somebody ask us if the Kahoot posted to Blackboard. Not yet, but it will be. Yes, that is the plan. All of the Kahoots that we have done, ideally, will be put on Blackboard. Hold on. There we go. All right, is that sharing the right thing? Can y'all see it? Nobody's joined, so that's not a good sign. There we go. Okay, there you go. And just for future reference, if y'all, and it looks like all you guys did this, which is helpful. So like in past Kahoots, this is one of the ways I take attendance. People put like their, Twitter handle or something as their name. Not helpful. So thank you guys for putting your actual name. Especially you, Taylor. All three names. All right, let's go ahead and get started. If you're not in yet, that's okay. The join code should be on the screen. All right, going all the way back to correlations. Whoa. Yeah, there's gonna be stuff in here that we haven't talked about in a while, but that's why we're doing it. Good. Okay, so this one is kind of tricky. So remember we talked about correlations. Correlations they have two poles. So you can either have a correlation that's -1 over here or a correlation that is 1 all the way over here. And if it's 0, that means there's no correlation at all. So the strength of a correlation is how close it is to one of those poles. So if it is 0.88 is a tempting answer because that is 0.88 is a bigger number than -0.98, obviously, but -0.98 is closer to -1. So -1 and 1 are both perfect correlations. Like they'll be straight lines either going up or going down. So -0.98 is very, very, very close to being a perfect correlation and is therefore the strongest. Okay. There will be at least a couple of correlation questions on your test. Which one is the master gland? Bonus point if somebody can put in the chat who this person is. The master gland is the pituitary gland. Okay, and this guy is He-Man. He-Man, his team that he works with is the Masters of the Universe. Pituitary gland, its action determines a lot of what all the other glands do. Glands secrete hormones. Pituitary gland puts out human growth hormone that helps us grow. All right, acetylcholine. I told you guys it does one thing. It does more than one thing, but the main thing that it does. Apologies if you can hear my dog snoring. I actually had to teach at the college yesterday, and she has some separation anxiety, so she gets a little clingy when I come back. Okay, so acetylcholine facilitates movement. Okay, so we talked about like dopamine would be a good answer for all these other things. Dopamine is pretty heavily involved in mood, sleep, emotional regulation. Serotonin would also be in there as well. But acetylcholine pretty much equals movement. That will be, if there's a question about acetylcholine on any test we ever take, it is movement. Neurotransmitter. If you have too little acetylcholine, you'll be paralyzed. And if you have too much of it, you'll have things like muscle spasms. All right, we talked a whole bunch about Pavlov's dogs today. Which perspective is it connected to? Behavioral perspective. Okay, so they were studying cognitive processes, but the behavioral perspective Guys like Pavlov and B.F. Skinner, John Watson, those are all in the behavioral perspective because they were studying behavior. All right, what's the order of the scientific method? And I don't think I have a question about this on the test because I don't 100% agree with this answer because I think you can do one or two things depending on how you look at it, but good discussion to have. So you could either ask a question first or observe first, but because you need to, you would need to formulate a question. That's why we did that assignment earlier in the semester. But in this case, observing, asking a question, make the hypothesis, do the experiment based on the hypothesis, gather the data, and then form your own conclusion. From that conclusion, somebody else can observe, and the process starts all over. I know, yes. All right. So where do these guys actually bind? At the receptor sites. Okay, so axon terminal is a good guess. So the axon terminal would be this top bit up here. But the receptor sites are where the neurotransmitter actually cross the synaptic gap and go into the dendrites of another neuron. So we talked about that lock and key mechanism. And you have to have the right key to open the lock. Well, that lock is actually at those receptor sites. And if you are trying to manipulate the action of a neurotransmitter through something like a narcotic drug, that is what you would use. You would have more receptor sites bind, if that makes any sense. All right. This is a way to cut down on experimenter bias, on selection bias. This is a single blind study. So if the experimenter doesn't know and the experimentee doesn't know, that would be double blind. But in this case, it's just the experimentee. The subject doesn't know if they're in the control group or in the experimental group. They think they are getting the same intervention either way. There's a way to cut down on bias and make sure that your results are nice and sound. All right, parasympathetic nervous system. There's a name for this, sort of the nickname for this system that will hopefully help you get to the answer. Yeah, we'll also talk about good test taking techniques because one of these things is not like the other. Right, so your parasympathetic nervous system, as opposed to your sympathetic nervous system, is your rest and digest system, okay? So talking about this good test taking techniques, if you'll notice, 3 of these things are excitatory processes. So your pupils dilating, your reflex arc engaging, increasing respiration, all those things mean that something is happening. So if you are being attacked, if somebody throws a ball really hard at you, all those things would happen so that you could see better, so you could have more oxygen in your tissues and hopefully avoid that threat. Digestion happens when you are relaxed, when you're at a resting state. So that was also a good way to come to that answer. But the easiest way is that the parasympathetic nervous system is the rest and digest system. Right, so the best answer here is a survey. So a case study is also in with a shout, but you can observe information through a case study. But if I were to ask all of you guys what your favorite color is, I wouldn't necessarily be able to understand that just by observing you. I would have to ask you to self-report that information, which is why something like a census, where you self-report how many people live in your house, things like that, is so useful, because there are some things that you can't observe through that type of research. All right, think about this one. That is false. Okay, so hormones are actually the slower of your two main chemical messengers, because neurotransmitters are the body's quickest chemical messengers. If you need to have a chemical message sent quickly, so in a situation where like somebody threw something at you, a neurotransmitter is going to get that message up to the brain faster than a hormone. All right, now the correlation question, because again, there will be multiple correlation questions on the test, because it's important. A strong positive correlation. Very good. So if it's above 0.75 in either direction, so if it's below negative 0.75 or above 0.75, we'd say that is a strong correlation. All right. That is an antagonist. Okay, so similarly to the way that Darth Vader in The Empire Strikes Back, which is what this is from, was trying to block Luke Skywalker, Han Solo et al. From escaping Planet Hoth. An agonist is actually going to try and stop the action of a neurotransmitter. So it's going to try and stop it from binding at those receptor sites. All right, long question, short answer. Think about this. This is a theory. Okay, so why is this not hypothesis? Because it kind of sounds like hypothesis. Well, if we look at the question, which part of the scientific method synthesizes observations to guide predictions? Okay, so a prediction is a hypothesis. Okay, so we can eliminate that one already. So what is a theory in terms of like research in the scientific method? So if you think about like gravity initially was a theory before it became a law. So if you have the theory that there's this invisible force pulling everything on Earth towards the center of the planet, which is essentially what gravity is, um, you would have different hypotheses sort of under the umbrella of that theory. So my hypothesis in that case would be that if I drop this ball, it will fall to the ground. If then, so if I, put a bunch of those hypotheses together, and if I test them a whole bunch of times, that is to try and prove or learn more information about my theory. So theory synthesizes a bunch of other research and also a bunch of hypotheses to create a broader idea of what's going on. Is false. So functionalism was was created by a guy named William James. Freud, we are going to be talking about psychoanalysis. They are pretty diametrically opposed ideas because Freud was all about subconscious. Functionalism was much more interested in how this actually worked in practice. So glial cells do a whole bunch of stuff, but there is one thing that they do the most, and that all of their functions sort of fall under in this category. Provide structural support to neurons. Very good. So they do things like creating the myelin sheath that makes reactions happen faster. They will fight off antibodies. They will do all kinds of stuff. They just hold them up. They do all kinds of stuff to make the neurons' lives easier. All right, we talked about this a good bit when we talked about medicine and how different medications for things like ADHD work. Is reuptake. So we've talked about how if there is neurotransmitter passing from a sending neuron to a receiving neuron, not all of that neurotransmitter is going to make it. Some of it is going to be diffused across that synaptic gap, and some of it is going to be taken back up into that sending neuron, and that process is called reuptake. You can inhibit this by using a reuptake inhibitor and sort of capping that receiving neuron to make sure that neurotransmitter stays where it's supposed to go. All right. I'm not going to ask you too much about brain anatomy, but this is one of the structures in the brain you will need to know. This is a very easy way to remember how to say it. What's the answer about this? This is your cerebellum. Okay, so how does cerebalance, like this very muscular man on this slack line, cerebalances with her cerebellum? Okay, so cerebellum is structure in your brain responsible for adjusting to shifts in weight and fine motor skills, things like that. Research method. It's not a complete sentence, but this will still point you towards answering this question, hopefully. This is your cerebellum. is a case study. There aren't that many Tiffany's out there in the world. So you're going to have to learn as much as you can from the people that do have 23 different personalities. That is a personality disorder called dissociative personality disorder. But yeah, there's not that many people in the world that exhibit those symptoms. So you're going to have to zoom in and learn as much as you can, like I said, from the people that do. That is true. Okay, so norepinephrine or noradrenaline, other name for it, can be useful in a short-term fight or flight situation and in a long-term one. So I don't know if any of you guys have bad allergies and have an EpiPen, but that is what is in an EpiPen, is epinephrine. So this is it will help you deal with symptoms that are happening immediately, but then also will camp out in your system for longer to hopefully fight off whatever allergic reaction you're having. Membrane surrounding a neuron. They are semi-permeable. Okay, so there is a lock and key mechanism, which means that only certain keys open certain locks. So you don't just have random neurotransmitters coming into your neurons that you may not want in there, but you obviously need some of them. And the problem then becomes if they're not permeable enough also. Right, the myelin sheath covers axon for insulation, helps speed neural impulses. The myelin sheath is created by the glial cells, and it works like insulation around an electrical wire, and it helps things happen a lot more smoothly and quickly. All right, learning by association. We just talked about this. Classical conditioning, very good. So classical conditioning, association, operant conditioning, punishment, and reward. Right, which is a neurotransmitter. Glutamate, very good. Okay, so testosterone and glucagon are both hormones. And then remdesivir was actually a early stage COVID-19 treatment, pre-vaccine, that was actually developed at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, which is my hometown and also where I used to work. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, glutamate, neurotransmitters. All right, we're gonna do a few more of these because we only got a few minutes left on our Zoom time. I did misspeak earlier. The Kahoots, or this Kahoot specifically, is already on Blackboard. So if you want to go back and play this, which I would recommend, free test, you can do it. It's an old white guy with a beard, but which old white guy with a beard? Edward? Oh, no, not Titchener. I misspoke. It's Wundt. You're right. Objective introspection. Titchener, I think I got this confused with another question. Objective introspection, Wundt, we're talking about, you had the little like doohickey that measured people's reaction times. Objective introspection, we're getting usually more quantitative data rather than qualitative, trying to understand how the brain works. It still wasn't super effective because Wundt did not have the kind of instrumentation that we do now. All right, there's a couple of different ways you can think about this. His frontal lobe. Okay, so it went through his eyeball. You can see here he lost that, RIP. But it went through the front part of his brain, which is the easiest way to remember that. But also, if you remember what we talked about Phineas Gage, the pre-accident thing that changed the most to post-accident was his personality. And personality is one of the things that the frontal lobe is most heavily involved with. Developed structuralism. Titchener. Okay, we found Titchener finally. This is another old white guy with a beard. I got my old white guys with beards confused. But Titchener was a guy who sort of took a lot of Wundt's ideas and took a more subjective approach to it. So he used a lot of early sort of proto association theory to try and get people to describe their experiences and then understand their psychology through that. So issue was that if you ask 10 people about what they taste out of the same cup of coffee, you're going to get 10 different answers. So the external validity of that type of research is not very high, and so structuralism did not last very long. And get to this answer too. We left. Very good. Okay, so remember we talked about Broca's and Wernicke's area. So that is over here on the left side of my brain. Both of those things deal with my ability to comprehend and produce language. So the left side of the brain does that. All right, afferent signals. Carrying messages from the senses to the central nervous system, like Najee Harris. Bitten your arm off to have Najee Harris in the Georgia game. No running back depth whatsoever. So those are your sensory neurons. Your motor neurons are the ones that receive messages from your central nervous system that tell you to move. sensory neurons. So me hearing my dog snore right now, that information is going to my ears. Sensory neurons in my ears pick that information up, transport it to my brain, and then my brain will tell my muscles and bones and whatnot to move to, pet her or whatever. All right, we will do 2 more. Get through 30. All right, so this is not just a few members, but all of the members of the group. So the whole group itself is the population. So if I was trying to learn things about the Alabama football team, my population would be the whole team itself. But maybe maybe I wouldn't have access to all of them. So I would just need to conduct a survey on all of the freshmen. So that would be my sample that I was using to gather information and make conclusions about the whole group. Okay. Last question. All right, so this is self-actualization. So if you look at our picture here, this was 2 years ago, obviously, because didn't win this year because of freaking Georgia. So achieving one's full potential, this is a humanistic idea, and the humanistic perspective of psychology. You have the team fulfilling their full potential, so self-actualizing, and then all 4 of these guys are in the NFL now, so we could say that they have self-actualized, fulfilled their potential as players as well. Okay, so like I said, that Kahoot is actually already on Blackboard. There's a folder called review materials in there. I think it's under course content. And then the Kahoot is in there, as well as all the crash course videos that I've used to compile my notes and work into you guys' lecture. I would suggest you watch a few of those as well, just to kind of get a more holistic look at all this stuff. And if you have any questions about the test, issues accessing it, questions about what's on it, all that kind of stuff, please do email me. I'll be checking those pretty much all the way up until Sunday night at midnight. Yeah, other than that, best of luck, team. I will see you guys next week, and I hope everything goes well.